Man, I hope you guys got some time on you, because we've got a lot of Sandbox changes to go over. We talked about this the other day, guys. Essentially, a Sandbox update called 2.1.4 will be rolling out at the end of the month, and we'll be buffing many of our subclasses, and we're also getting a slight damage reduction in Blade Barrage and in Nova Warp. So let's jump into the details. Guys, right off the bat, the subclasses that are getting damage increases: Golden Gun, the 3-shot and 6-shooter, Shadow Shot, Mobius Quiver, Arc Staff, Burning Maul, Hammer of Soul, Code of the Siegebreaker, Fist of Havoc, Sentinel Shield, Nova Bomb, Cataclysm and Vortex, and Daybreak. Small damage increases include Blade Barrage and Nova Warp. So right off the bat, guys, let's jump into the details of what's happening to each of these subclasses. First up, Hunter. 6-shooter kills return a bullet, and practice makes perfect super regeneration increase. Okay, hold on. Am I reading that right? 6-shooter kills return a bullet. What? Okay, currently right now, when you pop Top Tree Golden Gun, you have 6 shots. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I believe what they're trying to say here is that we don't just get 6 shots. If it keeps returning bullets as long as we're getting kills, then I guess you can get out as many shots as you want as long as you're getting kills within that time frame of your super. Oh my god, that's nasty. That is beyond nasty. If that is how it's gonna roll out, guys, Golden Gun will potentially become the best super in the game in terms of PvP. For PvE, for DPS, probably not, because of course you got to get kills in order to get return bullets. But for something like clearing just a number of ads, yeah. Oh, that's nasty. Now for practice makes perfect, that is a perk on Bottom Tree Gunslinger. It states enter a trance with each precision hit, reducing the cooldown of your super. So essentially, if they're also going to be buffing this, I'm very curious to how fast we can get our supers back. Blade Barrage. The damage is now heavily weighted on the delayed explosion instead of the knife impact. It now deals self-damage if the knives explode too close. They also fixed a bug where the knives would track allies. Okay, so from what I'm getting from this, it seems that there will be a delay from the time you use your super and when your opponents actually die. So yeah, it seems like you'll be able to still panic this super, but it's a good possibility that you'll trade. And given the fact that so many people tend to panic the super when they're on top of their enemies, now doing self-damage to yourself from the explosion, I would definitely say this is getting the Nova Bomb treatment. Interesting though. Now they did mention some notes here. This Golden Gun change brings increased uptime with your super. For the Way of the Outlaw, this means a skill-based mechanic to extend it. For Way of the Sharpshooter, it's the ability to earn your super more quickly. So Way of the Outlaw is Top Tree Gunslinger. Way of the Sharpshooter is Bottom Tree Gunslinger. Interesting. I'm pretty sure I may have misinterpreted the 6-shooter buff that's coming. Let me know in the comments below if you read that differently. Moving on, Night Stalker. Changes to Mobius Quiver. Entire damage bonus is applied on the first hit instead of stacking and multiplying. Increased tether radius and lifetime made it easier to fire successive tethers. Now, Mobius Quiver, guys, that is a perk found on Bottom Tree Night Stalker. It's essentially the subclass in which you fire multiple Shadow Shots in rapid succession. Currently, right now, Shadow Shot deals massive damage against tethered enemies, so it only deals the massive damage on the tail end. With this change, however, the entire damage bonus is applied on the first hit instead of stacking and multiplying. This one will also be interesting. Spectral Blades. Damage resistance and stealth decreased. Oh, wow. The duration of the super while invisible slightly decreased. So Spectral Blades is actually getting a small nerf in both its damage resistance and its duration. They did put some notes here. This is a step 1 for Shadow Shot, and we intend to keep improving the way it works. For this pass, we focus on Mobius Quiver, quality of life. Okay then. Moving on to Arcstrider. Super damage is now more heavily weighted toward the heavy palm strike attack. No attack damage was reduced, but much of the added damage for this super went into the heavy attack. Lethal current bonus damage increase. Okay, so let's go into those perks real quick on Arcstrider. Lethal current, guys, is a perk found on Top Tree Arcstrider. After dodging, each arc staff hit creates a damaging lightning aftershock. So we're essentially getting more AoE damage. Hopefully it is enough damage though to incentivize us dodging in the middle of us doing some DPS to enemies. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now as far as the heavy palm strike, again, I don't use arc staff that much. I'm pretty sure the combo that I would use was something like melee, and then do the heavy palm strike attack. So more damage on the heavy palm attack, I'm completely fine with that. Moving on to the Titan class, Sunbreakers. Sunspots double the damage of the burn on enemies. Thank God. I hope even double damage is going to be enough. Sunspots is just not doing a lot anywhere in the game. Sun Warrior, buff length increased from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. Now increases all outgoing damage. What? Okay, that's pretty nasty. Essentially, guys, that is a perk found on Bottom Tree Sunbreaker. It says passing through a sunspot causes your solar abilities to recharge faster and your super to last longer. That's all it does. It just makes your solar abilities recharge faster currently, but now, if we're gonna also get increased outgoing damage for everything, oh my lord, that may do a lot of things. I don't even know, guys. You also can throw more hammers when you're standing in your own sunspot. So if that's even buffing it on, say, the level of something like Melting Point, I mean, it needed to happen. That subclass has not been used, like, ever. Now, Burning Maw, the slam radius is now increased, and the Slam Fire Tornado improved homing. Okay, so right now, like if you're in Crucible, or really just anywhere, when you slam, you'll notice that the Fire Tornado actually has a tracking ability. It will chase down your enemies, but a lot of times enemies can just like jump up over it or get away from it. The tracking could definitely be improved. So I'm glad that that's actually getting increased, and the slam radius being increased too. It's going to be really nice, especially for me, whenever I have a super up behind me and I'm like trying to 1v1, say something like an arc staff. If that radius wraps behind me as well, that's going to be really good. I'm looking forward to it. Moving on to the Sentinel. Super damage is more heavily weighted on the heavy shield charge attack. No attack damage was reduced, but much of the added damage for this super went into the heavy attack. So very similar to the Palm Strike that's on Arcstrider, the R2 attack here for our Sentinel is improved. I think I'm probably going to need to go and get damage numbers of all of our current supers right now just to get an idea of how much these buffs increased our damage. Striker, Terminal Velocity. There are now 3 tiers of hang time. The amount of hang time for each tier has been reworked. Each tier of hang time now causes 4 damaging shocks instead of 3, and the damage for the hang time bonuses has been increased significantly. Okay, so let me go into that perk real quick. On the Striker class, there is a perk on Top Tree Striker called Terminal Velocity. It states that Fist of Havoc's ground slam attack leaves a damage-dealing field in its wake and deals more damage the longer it's in the air. I'm really not sure how much more damage it deals, and when it's in the air, guys, it's essentially like if you're coming off the side of a cliff and you're slamming like a tank or something, it's gonna do more damage. For Bungie to say that it's gonna get increased significantly means that it's gonna be a hell of a buff. And considering now that we're gonna have 3 tiers of hang time, and with each tier, you're now gonna be causing 4 damage shocks instead of 3. Yeah, they're definitely trying to make this a more viable super for things like DPS. Moving on to the perk Trample. The light shoulder attack super cost has been reduced by 85%. Trample can now trigger every half a second, up from every 1 second. So Trample, guys, is a perk found on Bottom Tree Striker. It states that destroying enemies with Fist of Havoc extends its duration. And that's actually a really good perk, guys. Like, you can go through, if you've got enough enemies in front of you, you will keep your super for like ever with that perk. Considering that they're reducing the light shoulder super attack by 85%. Oh my god, that doesn't even make sense. Really? You reduced it by 85%, or you reduced it 85% of 100%? I don't even know. Any type of reduction is really nasty, but if they're actually reducing it by 85%, yeah, that's, I don't even know, guys. Trample will now be able to also trigger every half a second. Yeah, there's definitely probably going to be people using Bottom Tree Striker now. Now, they gave some notes here for Code of Earthshaker. The change to Terminal Velocity should make it more engaging. The first tier is now easier to achieve. For the second tier, you'll probably want some more high ground. But if all you have is flat land, a directional slam near the peak of your lift can proc it. Finally, there's a new third tier that will require some serious height to activate. On top of that, you'll not only need to land your hang time slams, but also do it quickly enough to get in all 4 possible to maximize damage. Okay, so let me just break that down. Right off the bat, guys, it sounds like actually getting the 2nd tier of terminal velocity to activate won't be difficult, as you'll be able to do that at your peak of your jump or the peak of your lift. The 3rd tier, though, will require probably us jumping off of something, a building, a cliff. The question that I'm wondering, does terminal velocity buff, or will it buff our aftershock damage? I know it actually gives us an extra aftershock. I'm just wondering, does that buff include actual extra damage per shot? I don't know. We'll have to test that one out. Now, they go on to say, with Code of the Juggernaut, if you play it right, you can extend your super for minutes in PvE. He states, I know this sounds crazy, but it takes foresight and strategic choices. The light shoulder attack is almost a movement mode with the new cheaper costs. With the increased mobility, you should be able to lay some shoulders on bigger targets and then go on a run for little guys to rebuild your super energy. Oh, this and Syntheseps, yeah, I'm gonna be in heaven. Moving on, we got the Warlock class. Dawnblade changes, super duration has increased. Oh wow, I guess that's across the board. Voidwalker, Cataclysm, increased detonation radius, cluster damage increase, improved cluster bomb homing to make it more consistent against single targets. Cluster bombs no longer detonate one another. Okay, so let's talk about Cataclysm. On top tree Voidwalker, which is actually my favorite tree of Voidwalker, it states that Nova Bomb travels slowly and seeks enemies. Detonations shatter into smaller seeker projectiles. You can also fire your weapon at the Nova Bomb to detonate it early. So they're increasing the detonation radius of this. They're also increasing the damage of the clusters that are released. And they're also increasing the tracking of those clusters, specifically against single targets. Something I am very annoyed about when I actually go to Nova Bomb a single target. The clusters don't even go to that target. Like, it just drifts off to somewhere else. It also states that cluster bombs no longer detonate one another. All of this sounds really good. Again, guys, everything that you see across the board so far, you're seeing that Bungie is trying to obviously make everything very viable from a damage standpoint in something like PvE. Vortex, linger damage increase significantly. Now, Vortex, that's not the grenade that it's talking about. That's a perk found on bottom tree. Essentially, Nova Bomb creates a singularity which continually damages enemies trapped inside of them. So they're increasing the damage for this as well. Now, moving on to Nova Warp. Slower movement while charging. Charging costs more energy and overall duration is reduced. Damage resistance reduced very slightly. We're also getting a PvP damage reduction. Charge detonation will no longer be able to one-shot another player in their super, provided it has damage resistance. So what it's trying to say right there, there's obviously going to be a purpose for you to masterwork your armor. Masterwork and armor for PvP doesn't do anything outside of adding more to your damage resistance while you are in your super. We'll have to see and check exactly what the cutoff point for that is. Like, how much do we actually have to masterwork our armor in order to survive a detonation from Nova Warp? We saw all these changes probably coming, guys. We knew Nova Warp was probably going to be addressed here soon. Now, the notes here summed up Nova Bomb now not just for large groups. The Nova Bomb changes above are all small, but we think together they will help bring it down into a good place. A place similar to the supers that we're raising up. Stormcaller, Storm Trance, increased number of targets for Chain Lightning by 1. Now, Chain Lightning is a perk found on top tree Stormcaller. It states that this electrocuting melee ability hits at extended range and chains lightning from the struck target to nearby enemies. I'm not really sure how much it actually chains right now or how many enemies it chains up to. I don't play Storm enough, but for my Stormcallers out there, the number of targets has now been increased by 1. Now again, all of these changes, guys, will be coming out, or at least slated for January the 29th. They did state that this is the current plan, but things could change in the next few weeks. Moving on to competitive. They go on to state that next week, we will be adjusting matchmaking settings in competitive. This change is scheduled to take effect on January 15th. They stated that the World Systems team has been gathering feedback and using it in conjunction with player data to make the next change for how we match opponents in the competitive playlist. They state that we will be changing the matchmaking parameters so that opponents you find in the competitive matchmaking will be closer to your glory rank. While the imbalanced match can still happen, we believe that this change will reduce the number of occurrences dramatically. Players may experience longer matchmaking times, as we will try to ensure a good glory rank match before opening up the search criteria. So yeah, guys, that's actually probably a good thing. I really don't know how much imbalance there is in competitive in terms of like who you're getting matched up against. I have heard stories that people who were like sub 2000 were getting matched up with people in legend rank. So yeah, that's a good change coming. Next up, we have Iron Banner returning to us next week. He brings with him weapons and armor to be earned by Guardians who chose to face off in the Great Tournament. Here are the rewards you can get your hands on. Essentially, guys, going to be Bite of the Fox and Hero's Burden. If you don't have a God roll Bite of the Fox, it is a good sniper. I am still going to be gunning for a good rolled Hero's Burden. Now, for the rest of the TWAB, there's some errors that are getting fixed, like some guitar errors and some other stuff. Feel free to check in the description below for the actual TWAB if you want to check it out. Whew, I know this was a long video, guys. I think we're banking almost close to 20 minutes right now. Again, we will be reviewing all of these changes as they go live on the 29th, as well as keeping up with what changes in the actual patch notes themselves, because again, anything is subject to change before the update goes live. Well, fellas and ladies, you all have a wonderful Friday night, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.